Hello and welcome to episode 2 of my Kerbal Kareer. Now the first thing you'll notice is we have a different ship than last time. The ship has all the same parts minus 2 goo canisters. I had to remove those because they were making the vessel too top heavy, as well as this fuel tank and that engine being up top was also making it completely uncontrollable. So I did a few edits. I'll show you how to do that with Kerbal Construction Time when the flight's over, but for now, let us begin. Already throttled up with SAS on, and launch. Now this is going to complete 2 contracts for us, firing these engines while landed and the solid rocket boosters. So those are taken care of. And the third contract that we need to be doing is going to be the liquid fuel engines, the LV-45s, T-45s, these two. And that one will be at 6,600 meters. So this is just a pretty standard launch where I have the solid rocket boosters in 2 stages as to not go too quickly and waste fuel, and also not go too quickly as to be going faster than some of these contracts will allow. Now I put a second stack decoupler on those solid rocket boosters. As you can see, it's below the BACC, and I just launched it there really quickly. Now I've cut the throttle because I want to go back down in the atmosphere so I can launch the large solid rocket booster. That way I can complete the contract for it, and I'll be using my LV-45s to slow my descent so I don't go too quickly. There we go, the solid rocket booster is done, and we seem to have no control over our vessel. Okay, see if I can't turn this thing around. And it all just goes to hell. Okay then. Can't say I was expecting that, because I wasn't. So with our rocket tearing itself apart, this is just a pretty standard landing. I'm already too low for either of the parachute contracts, so I'll just try to collect as much science as I can while hopefully landing safely. And I do manage to land safely with these 2 parachutes at a rather slow pace, as you can see. But we eventually get down, and once on the surface, again, we try to collect as much science as we can by jumping out and grabbing some surface samples. Now I had stated I was biting off far more than I can chew, and that was a correct statement since I couldn't actually get all the contracts done. I'll have to make separate vessels for some of them. Now we collected 27.8 science, 2,000 funds, which doesn't really cover our costs, but at least we got a bunch of parts back so we can equip these again and not have to wait too long to build. And of course we rescued Jebediah. Now, let's see if there are any new contracts. Science data from space around Kerbin. That one should be easy enough to do. And test the Sepatron. Okay. So I think before I do anything, I'm actually going to wait out these last couple of sciences, which will just take a couple days. That way, I can start researching the next tier science and get some more parts. There we go. I'm going to warp to complete all of the science tech. Now it definitely would have been more efficient for me to actually start building another vessel while I was waiting to warp, but I kind of want to get the parts unlocked so I can start building with them. So let's hop in the Research and Development Center and see what else I can grab. I have 45 science, so I can grab 2. Let's see, this will give me batteries and Science Junior, so I'll take that. That one's going to take 45 days to unlock. And that would give me fairings, which would be very useful. However, I might actually go with this, simply because it will start getting me some Kethane components, like a Kethane tank, as well as the launch clamps and struts. I'll go for that because I need the struts. Let's close out of that. And I'm going to make another vessel really quickly to see if I can't complete some of these other contracts. Okay, so we're back on the launch pad with hopefully a vessel that's going to be able to complete 4 contracts for us. Now I'm just going to turn up the ambient light because it's a little bit dark. Now the first contract that I'm trying to do here is the Sepatron testing, which is going to require me to get to 15,500 meters or 15.8 kilometers. I have 4 Sepatrons right there toward the middle of the engine, toward the bottom of the middle engine, and I'll be firing them once I get to the right altitude. There they go. So that's one contract complete. The second one that I'm going to try to do is the radial decouplers, which are holding the two fuel tanks on the side. And I'm just going to time accelerate and get up to the suborbital trajectory and start doing some science, which is something I forget far too often to do when I'm launching missions. Usually I'm so focused on the contracts I just forget to do the science. Now, I'll be falling back down pretty soon. There we go. And I'm just going to transfer the fuel into the center engine so I have more to try and complete the third contract that I'm planning to do. And we'll hit the right height in just a moment. There we go. There was the radial decoupler contracts, so we got 2 out of the 4 we want. Now the third one is going to be this top-mounted parachute. The Mark 16 parachute is going to require me to be going less than 470 meters per second. Last time I tried this, as you just saw, my vessel ripped itself apart. And as you're going to notice, I don't quite get going slow enough and my vessel wants to flip around. So I give up on trying to do the top mount parachute and just go for the radial parachute, which I do manage to get. So I was able to do 3 of the 4 contracts I wanted, which isn't too bad. Although I would have liked the 4th, it just means I'm going to have to do that top mount parachute at a different time. Plus I was able to collect some science, which is always helpful. Overall the mission went pretty well. We got about 60 science and most of our parts back, which we can of course use for later vessels. Now, with the science I got, I do want to go and get the electrics upgrade so I can start getting some solar panels and start planning larger missions. So, I've got a moon lander because I want to finish up that moon contract where I gather all the science from both high, low, and on the surface. So this is going to take 18 days to complete. It's quite a massive vessel. And my next tech isn't until another 22 days. So I don't have anything to do until this vessel's done. So I'm just going to warp to complete. And we can launch this vessel. Now, I was going to show a scene where I was building it. However, I can't necessarily do that because the recording software, as I stated, was buggy. Although I have found out a way to detect when it's doing it. Basically, the file size of the recorded video is significantly smaller because it's only recording a frame like every 1 or 2 seconds. But let's launch this and of course put Jebediah in there. Now this vessel is designed pre-electrics tech upgrade, meaning I have no solar panels whatsoever. So the only electricity generation I have are the alternators on the engines. So it has quite a few battery packs that will hopefully I guess keep it charged. Since I do have TAC life support, it's kind of necessary that I have electricity, otherwise my Kerbal will die. Now, one thing that's really neat that I'm also working on a mod spotlight for are these procedural fuel tanks. These are solid rocket boosters because none of the ones I currently have unlocked were either way too massive or they were way too small. So I created a procedural one with enough thrust that worked just right, and I stuck 3 of them on. I also have 3 of each science module I currently own, so that I can try and get as much science as I can on this trip. So, by now I hope you've noticed the large white text at the bottom right that says simulation. That's because what you're currently seeing is a simulation. The screen recorder bugs that I was talking about earlier, sometimes I've noticed it happens when I change scenes, such as if I'm in the Kerbal Space Center where you're overviewing the VAB, the Academy, the space plane hangar, that main screen, and I go into the VAB, the screen recorder will not record the VAB scene. Now it recorded the main scene at the Kerbal Space Center, but once I launched it, it did its odd, choppy, 1 frame every couple of seconds recording pattern, and I didn't catch on to it. So, pretty much this entire episode's been post-commentary, and this is the exact same vessel. Once I ended the recording for that segment of the video, then I noticed it was choppy, and I went back into the VAB, pushed simulate, spent 1,300 of the funds to simulate it, and I'm just launching it again to show you guys exactly what I did. Except in this I won't be really gathering the science because it's not really necessary since I've already gathered it, and the second I leave this particular scene of controlling this vessel, then it's just going to be deleted and all the progress gone. So for the most part, this is kind of just a recreation to, instead of say, oh, I went to the moon, I got 600 science, now I'm back, let's move on, I actually have something to show for it. And what you see now is actually the first evidence of this, is I already planted a flag on the moon, and you can see it right there in the map view. So this is indeed a mission that is taking place after I've already done the actual mission that's going to be in the continuity of my Kerbal Kareer series. So I am just waiting to get into orbit and then burn toward the moon. Now, a couple things that went a little differently is in the normal burn, when I was launching, I was already in the correct spot to just go straight from launch and then continuously burn straight into an encounter with the moon and thus enter the orbit of the moon and land from that. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the screen recorder bug because it has never happened to me before. When I went on kind of that month-long hiatus where I didn't make any videos, I had upgraded my operating system from Windows 8 to Windows 8.1, and since then, it's been very odd. I've actually had to take a non-up-to-date driver for my graphics card because I couldn't record at all with the current version of the graphics card that I had. So I went and downloaded a graphics card driver that's about 2 months old, which I believe is the same one I recorded my last video with before that month-long disappearance. And it's been working so far, whereas the other graphics card didn't work at all, or driver I should say. Now, one thing that I do want to do, for the game of course, is I'm going to actually try to land right next to my flag, and for the most part I'm quite successful in doing so. Now, you can imagine that this is going to expend about 500 meters per second of fuel I didn't have to expend on the first mission, and it's going to lead into a reason as to why I don't necessarily make it back safely in this simulation. And that's because I waste a lot of fuel just trying to show you that I already did this mission, and I guess I don't really need to do it perfectly twice and try to fake that this is a simulation. Or rather, pass this off as what really happened even though it's not. And one of the reasons for that, in the real launch, what happened is I actually lost a couple of parts, the fuel tank and engine. They got ripped off due to me entering the atmosphere a little too quickly. So even though this simulation, if I had done it right and I had landed it perfectly, then those 3 battery packs, the engine, and the fuel tank, I wouldn't have been able to use again for Kerbal construction time, meaning I have to actually rebuild them instead of just reusing them. So a couple things like that would just add discontinuity if I tried to pass this off as the real thing, since I can't exactly control what gets destroyed by the air physics from Ferrum. So we have successfully landed on the moon for the second time, and of course I normally would have collected science, and if you notice, the science has already been gathered. That's just the simulation telling me that. Of course I don't actually get any of this because this is a simulation. Now I'm just going to pull Jebediah out here and fly him over to the flag so we can read its plaque. Because just as this time in the simulation and in the real time, or the actual flight, when Jebediah jumped out of his vessel and made first contact as the first Kerbal ever on the moon, he did a faceplant. And I felt as though that memory should have been stored in a very monumental flag. So we can see the flag right there in all of its glory as we slide past it uncontrollably. That same hexagon-shaped flag. Now, on the idea of flags, when I had started my original series, Mass Transit, quite a few months ago, actually, I only had like 14 subs, or subscribers, and now I have, I think, over 70. Meaning, if someone wants to make a custom flag texture that I use, feel free to do so and send me it. I'm not very good at drawing anything or even creating custom flags. So, I mean, if you want to do that, then that'd be awesome, and I'd definitely give you a mention. So, just something to say, because sometimes these normal stock flags just get a little boring, and having a special one for my career mode would be great. Now, Jebediah, we're just going to bring him back to the vessel and start taking off. I guess a couple things that went differently between this launch and my launch where was the real one is I actually had half a fuel tank of fuel from these 3 bottom engines. However, with this simulation, I have less than a quarter fuel in each of the 3 bottom fuel tanks. Now, a couple things that went differently compared to what you're going to see now in the simulation and what happened in my real career mode is mostly the fact that I ran out of fuel right now. And in the career mode, I was able to use the fuel to get into a descending orbit into Kerbin. And from that descending orbit, I was able to actually start thrusting toward Kerbin itself, meaning that my time would be cut down significantly, because as you see, I run out of electric charge. Now, the same thing happened to me in the real launch, where I ran out of electric charge, except I was a little bit closer to the planet, though it was almost the same area. And what I did is I started firing my thrusters closer to the planet, just like I'm doing right now. Well, currently I'm firing so that it reduces my time to periapse, and then I started firing straight toward the planet to make it so I'd wrap around the backside of the planet, as well as go much faster toward it, instead of just letting gravity pull me in, like what I'm doing right now, where I'm actually thrusting toward the planet so that I can get there much faster. Now, what the problem is I've run out of fuel at this point in the simulation, whereas I still had nearly a full fuel tank, this 50 units of liquid fuel that was in this small fuel tank. I had that nearly full at about this time. I believe this is actually where I staged. So I was able to continue to thrust further forward, get my periapsis to, I want to say, 15 kilometers, and get to Kerbin much more quickly, as well as give myself a lot more extra electric charge. Now, I did run out of electric charge just when I was a bit closer to the planet, at about here. Well, I wouldn't be flying straight down toward the planet at about this point in the real flight, but when I was about 200 kilometers away from the surface and approaching my periapsis is when I ran out of electric charge. However, I was able to land soon enough so that Jebediah didn't die of toxicity, due to TAC life support requiring you to have electric charge to filter the air so that your Kerbal can continuously breathe in fresh oxygen rather than breathing in carbon dioxide. Now, as you can see, since Jebediah is dead in the simulation, we have no control over this vessel. So the air physics destroy the bottom half of our vessel, and we just kind of sit on top of the engine, and that eventually gets blown away. Now, of course, I can't activate the parachute because of the lack of control, but I can just fall. So let's speed things up to 4 times acceleration until we slam into the ground and die. Or explode. Since Jebediah was already dead, I don't think we can die twice. Now I pushed End Simulation to get myself to go back to the VAB. And as you can see, we're here at the VAB now. And this is the same vessel that I had simulated for, 1,300 funds, which is nice how it actually costs money that you can't do it infinitely. And the price just changed based on what vessel you're using. Of course, that is from Kerbal Construction Time. Now, just to prove to you that that was a simulation, you can see that my tech and my building has already been completed, as well as I already have the electrics tech unlocked and over 700 science. Now, if we go into the Kerbal Academy, we can see Jebediah is in fact alive and available for the next mission. So yeah, this is just a simulation, or what I showed was, and I'm just going to launch one last vessel really quickly to end up this episode. Alright, so we've got one more flight to do, and that is going to be this vessel right here. Let's launch it. Put Jebediah in there. Now this is just a small vessel that I'm going to use to complete a couple of contracts. And that's going to be, I believe 3 contracts is my goal. Either that or I have 4 that I'm going to try and do. We'll see here. Now the contracts are testing the LV909 liquid fuel engine, which is this one right here. And while it's on Kerbin landed again, I don't know why I got that contract twice. And also I have the TR-18 stack decoupler while landed. And the third one is this right here, yeah, the Rockomax 4875. It's a really tiny liquid fuel engine. So let's turn SAS on, throttle up, and launch. There goes 2 contracts, right there, done with. And I just need to hit 5,600 meters, as well as being at least 160 meters per second before I stage. Now I am using decouplers from the procedural parts mod because I just like how they work. They're also cheaper than some of the other decouplers. So I'm going to throttle down so I don't go too fast, because I do have to be less than 260 meters per second while remaining faster than 160. There we go. I'm just going to stage right there. Not even really care that I wasted a bit of fuel. It should be more than enough. That stage is just going to fly by me, run out of fuel, and then kind of drop back down to Kerbin. That is definitely interesting to see. So, I suppose the last one that I'm going to make an attempt at is the Mark 16 parachute, something I've tried to get for 3 times now. So for 3 separate flights I've tried to actually complete this contract, and this one is definitely the most promising for actually doing just that. Now I do not have the Kerbal Engineering Redux part on, so I can't exactly see what my apoapsis is very easily, other than of course going into the map view. I'm going to throttle up because I'm going to try to make this about 30,000, and then I'm just going to cut the throttle. That way I can go up to 30,000, let gravity pull me back down and hopefully get me to 170 meters per second, or if it pulls me down faster, then I'll use my remaining engine fuel to slow myself down. So we are falling back down. Stop time acceleration because we're nearing the window that we actually have to test this. And it looks like everything is going to work out just fine. We'll stage right there. Deployment failed because we are actually too high up for the parachute to work, but we got the contract completed. So since I do have the realistic real shoots mod installed, I'm just going to arm that so it will deploy when it's ready. And that's apparently at 21 kilometers. So that's deployed, and I'm just going to fall back down to the Kerbal Space Center. And of course, having real shoots to apply its physics over a duration instead of instantaneously is just much softer, I suppose, when landing, rather than having things get ripped apart and or break. I am going to fire my engine just a little bit so I have a softer landing, and that way we can recover both these parts and some of the liquid fuel. That way I can get, I guess, a little bit of money back. So let's recover this. Now that was a nice and easy successful mission. Oh look, apparently there's an update for Kerbal construction time. I'll have to look into that. Anyhow, that was a nice easy mission. where we got 4 contracts completed. We have over 700 science, and I'm going to spend that really quickly before we call it an end of the episode. Now I'm just going to time accelerate through my picky selection of what science I want. The first thing I get is flight control for the fairings. I also am going to get precision engineering so I can start, or excuse me, I do not get precision engineering. I'm just mostly looking through them. I do get aerodynamics and advanced construction for the infernal robotics parts, as well as getting the carbonite parts. I do have carbonite installed as a mod because it adds another resource for us to explore, mine, and hopefully make profit off of. I do get advanced rockets as well as fuel systems and the advanced electrics so that I can get pipes, converters, and basically bigger rockets to start launching even larger vessels as I start decreasing my construction times. Okay, so with the research selected, we have a lot of tech on its way, and in about 22 days we'll have it all upgraded. Now I have 6 upgrades from my mission to the moon, so I am actually going to start spending some of this. First, I want to get that upgraded a little bit, and I want to start on rate 2. Now the reason I want to start on rate 2 is so I can start building 2 vessels at one time, as well as reducing the, not construction, but research time of some of the stuff in the R&D facility. And I think for the last 2 I'll just upgrade my first rate a little bit more. That way we can build ships much more quickly, as well as getting this tech done with in a maximum of 20 days for advanced electronics. Now with our flight out of the way and our research underway, I would say that this brings us to the end of our second episode for my Kerbal Career. I thank you all for watching. This is PTTGRW, signing out.